Hello. What a lovely natural lull in the chatter, which has been very helpful. Thank you. Thank you all for joining us today for our last session. If you've made it here, gold star. I'm going to assume it's nothing to do with the drinks that are planned later. And you're all just very invested. So thank you very much for coming. Also, thank you to Claire Stevens-Lee for managing to wrangle us all today. And also Sam and company who are doing all the tech. Thank you very much. It's been a great day. We've heard a lot about the changing landscape. We've heard a lot of the buzzwords around pivoting and portfolio careers and the different ways that freelancers are adapting and the realities of the industry at the minute. But I think it's worth saying that ultimately there are a lot of us out there who just want to make stuff, essentially. And that is why we have assembled this team of experts today, because they all have different routes to getting things made. I'm not going to use the C word, content, but they all bring screen projects to life in their own way. So I'm joined by Ciaran Lyons, who did have a beautiful headshot, but we have cropped that. I feel like we've done him dirty. For context, he was in a bed of daffodils and it was stunning. Ciaran, you're an award-winning filmmaker. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, so I'm a writer-director of genre fiction films. My debut feature film, Tummy Monster, we got nominated for Best Feature at the 2025 Scottish BAFTAs. We won a number of international film festivals, and we shot it in 5 days, basically with the money that I saved up for 4 or 5 years, earning less than the national average. So, you know, it was a very, very low budget project. So I guess I'm kind of the do it in a non-sensible way guest.
Excellent. Alex Harron, you have developed your own ideas and taken them to indies and got commissions that way. Do you want to just introduce yourself for us?
Yeah, my name's Alex Harron. Basically, mostly make observational documentaries that are sports, essentially. So I'm a bit of a one-trick pony. Essentially, what I kind of do is I develop an idea, make sure the contributors are on board. I normally make a pitch video, a deck, and then what I tend to do is take it to a production company. And then the idea would be that instead of going to a commissioner by myself, which might be, I guess at the start it was a bit more daunting, but also that if you have a production company behind you, it seems like more of a solid package. So the 3 documentaries that I've made for BBC Scotland have been nominated for RTS, Celtic Media and a BAFTA with 0 wins so far.
And Arabella Page Croft, you have built a company taking ideas to screen. But I don't want to talk too much about Black Camel just now. Tell us about yourself.
And Black Camel, I kind of feel like I am Black Camel often. So I run Black Camel, founded Black Camel with my husband, Ciaran Parker. He is also our head of production. And the company has grown from being him and I, really, we met making short films, 25 years ago. And that was really nice because we both worked out that we didn't want to be in each other's path. So he's very good at getting things made. And I guess I'm the hustler and the salesperson. And, so I go out and try and, close the deals and I cast the projects and package them. And, I guess I'm the executive producer of the company. And we've grown Black Camel. We're now a team of 8, which is, it's a lot of overhead. And I can talk about that a bit later. But, we started off making horror films, talk about that as well. And now we really make a lot of kind of crime drama. That's been has become more sustainable. And I've got some crew members in the audience today, but we just wrapped our latest show, didn't we, last Friday, had a big party. We're all a bit tired, but we had a really good time up in the Hebrides, and that is season 2 of Anne Chillen, the Gallic crime drama that we make, but made lots of different things in between, and be happy to answer any questions from animation to horror films to detective drama to queer shows, a lot of different skills, but no docs, actually, no documentaries.
Excellent, thank you very much. Perfect segue there, 2 questions. We do have a QR code on the top left of the screen, you're right. Please, if a question pops into your head, use the QR code and send that question in as and when you get the idea, so that we're not trying to get all the questions at the last minute at the end of the session, because if we do have enough time, we will do questions. So if it comes to you, just send it in. Ciaran, we are going to take a look now at a clip from Tummy Monster.
I represent a client in need of an immediate tattoo.
Fucking hell.
My client is an extremely successful and well-known musician.
You got some murky shit going on.
You are looking after your daughter tomorrow?
I can sense it.
Maybe you're not as brave and honest as I thought you were.
I was wondering. If I could get a selfie. Yeah, I just don't think that you're like registering how big a deal this is that he's in my shop.
This is gonna be so good for you.
I mean, if that's what you say it is.
What do you mean if?
Bro, just respect it now.
Am I being unreasonable here?
Let it go, Tails. Trust me.
Everyone thinks you're amazing because you're rich and you're famous, but none of it's fucking real because you're not real.
You are tangling with a being from a higher plane.
But you think he's better than me?
He better than you.
That's commitment!
Just warning you.
Give me that fucking selfie. That selfie. Just give me the selfie.
Nope.
What the fuck am I doing?
I mean, we can talk about it if you want.
You are not even a real human being.
I can say the same about you. Oh, man.
I mean, yeah, you could. But, come on.
I think it's fair to say that a feature film, and particularly a good one like Tummy Monster, is a huge undertaking. So I'd like to just chat to you a bit about the development process. What did that look like for you? And how did you find writing a script that you knew had to be shot in such a short period of time and on such a small budget? Like, how did you find that?
So before I made Tummy Monster, like I started out learning filmmaking by making music videos, and I made about 50 music videos by the time that I started making short films, made a handful of short films, directed some commercials. And it was around the time that the first time I got a funded short film. It was really overly ambitious, and that was actually a 5-day shoot as well, and had a budget which is essentially the same as Tummy Monster. And there was like a particular scene where I felt like, okay, the drama in this scene is very, very clear, and there's essentially like the stakes and the motivation between the two characters is so clear that the actors are able to just go and create like very compelling energy. And all the other stuff of like prosthetics and crane shots and crowd scenes, it meant that we were always behind schedule, and whenever we showed up to make a shot, we were already late. We couldn't actually have any time for performance. So I just wanted to make a performance-driven film because I had this idea, with all the experience I had, that it was possible to make a feature film if you prioritize that approach, that you could do it a lot faster and a lot cheaper than people tell you can. So I didn't at that point have the idea, and I just was kind of like saving up money because I kept, I couldn't get any traction essentially with the funders. I just thought, right, it's time to just do this. And then the idea just kind of, just dropped out of the sky. I needed the right idea for this approach to work. And because I suppose I was hungry for it. Like when it kind of came to me, I just knew, right, that works for this style of filmmaking. And then, so I wrote the first draft really quite quickly, like 3 months. It was in October 2022, I started writing the first draft, and then I started sending it to agents because I knew I needed a good cast, and I didn't have a lot of money, so part of the offer was I approached good actors who I also knew were interested in writing and offered them a co-writing credit on the film. And then we then had like 3 months till the shoot where they we're feeding into their characters a lot, and then they are credited as co-writers, and they have they really feel a lot of ownership of the film. And then it meant that we built what were the initial characters around our cast. Yeah, so I don't know, there's an awful lot you could say, but I'm conscious we're kind of short on time. But it was actually really amazing knowing I'm writing to this budget, because after Tummy Monster, when I sort of thought, well, maybe this is going to be such a success, who knows if my next feature film is going to be 1 million, 10 million, 100 million, that you don't know what budget you're writing to. As it turns out, it's quite low. But at that point, like I knew exactly what my budget was. So when you're kind of trying to find a story solution and you've got multiple options, you always go with the one that you can do fast. It's like, that's a valid option, that's a valid option. How are we going to move the story forward? It's always the thing that you can do that's fast and it's not going to cost you any time. And in a way, it made the process feel quite free. A lot of the time they say, like, what was it? Like, limitation is limitation is very good for creativity. And I did find that in this case. It was actually a total joy to make that film. Like, it was a brilliant, euphoric experience, way better than the short films. So, yeah, although the budget was like super low, it was creatively immensely rewarding. So, yeah.
What size crew were you working with?
Small. So we basically had like DOP, like very good DOP. Everyone was very, very good. So DOP, focus puller, camera assistant. We had like a kind of trainee lighting assistant, grip, sort of all-rounder. Costume. This is like my partner was doing costume and production design, and also all the sort of female phone voices, which we then later replaced. And I was doing all the male phone voices to the actors. And then we had like a kind of all-rounder, like art department kind of guy who's like my best friend who owned the shop. And then we had like a couple of runners, DIT. But yeah, so you've got a combination of people who are emotionally very invested. And that's not that uncommon. It's not something to be embarrassed about. To have family on a low-budget shoot is not actually something to be embarrassed about. That happens a lot. When you're having these intense like shoot days, it's actually very good not to be surrounded by strangers. And then, like the DOP, we'd made like 4 shorts together before, so we've got like a very good like professional rapport, and we are friends as well. So yeah, the crew was like really stripped back. We didn't have an AD. I was basically ADing it myself. So small, but I went by like a huge commercial that was shooting in Glasgow the other day, and I just saw like all these like guys just standing by the van of kit, just like farting around their phone, and that's what film shoots can look like, and I'm not saying they shouldn't, but there was none of that. Like, everyone's there and everyone's super engaged, and it does create a certain level of urgency to the film, because we shot 16 hours of footage in 5 days, which is a really like pretty decent feature film shooting ratio, because the camera is rolling all the time, and that's actually pretty good for the actors. They're not sitting around getting out of character, they're in character like a large proportion of the day. So yeah, anyway.
Thank you. Alex, I think we're going to take a look at a clip from your documentary, Running in the Family.
It's the incessant kind of day after day after day, and also then turning that into a performance.
She's definitely her mother's daughter.
The McColgan gene, certainly on the female side for sure, is just that dogged determination, just that never say die attitude, just always want to prove people wrong.
We're very alike in our headspace, we kind of know what we want and we go about getting it done. She is very like me in that way.
She runs very like her mother,
I was just thinking that, extraordinarily similar style.
Yeah, much taller, but that big gait.
Sometimes there is a bit of negativity to the fact that she maybe hasn't run as quick as her mum. There's always been that of, I'll show you.
Brave run from Englishman Clarke.
So you go it alone to a certain point, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you've spoke about this a wee bit at the introductions, but it would be good just to hear a wee bit more in depth about how you go from having an idea that's yours and sort of developing that on your own to then getting it to the point where it's commissioned with a broadcaster.
Yeah, I mean, I guess most of my ideas come off online. They start as news stories, essentially. I was really funny with this one. It was coming up to New Year, and we've seen 2 separate adverts, me and my wife, in terms of Ailish was on BBC Hogmanay show, and she was on the STV one with her mum. And my wife knows nothing about sport, and she was like, "Oh, are they sisters?" And I explained the whole backstory and stuff like that. And my wife knows, obviously, I'm obsessed with sport. She was like, "Why don't you make a documentary about that?" And I was like, "It's done. She just won the gold medal at the Commonwealth Games. Somebody's probably already made it." And then because my wife works for the NHS, she went back to work 2 days later. And I'm bored in the house, and I'm like, has anybody made an Ailish McCulkin documentary? So essentially what I done was, like, I found out nobody had, and I was like, oh, when's the most appropriate time after January the 1st that I could get in touch? And insanely, like, she had an old website that she'd been made up herself for 10 years previous that actually had her own mobile phone number online, which, like, I told her, take that down immediately. So anyway, I got in touch with her directly through WhatsApp and her agent, and basically they got back to me, like, same day and said, look, kind of interested, but then I had to manage expectations. Her agent was like, oh, are you going to go to Netflix with this? And I'm like, of course not. But I didn't say it that way. I explained to him that, look, this might be a good film for BBC Scotland, and I think, like, because he was, like, Canadian, based in, like, London, there was, like, somehow this is, like, small regional TV. I tried to explain to him that this would be on the iPlayer, and it would sit next to some of those other sports stocks that they've got there. Like, at the time they had, like, one of Messi and, like, Mo Farah and stuff like that, and that kind of, like, greased the wheels a little bit. So basically what I done was I made sure that they were, like, firmly on board. I showed some of my previous work. I explained what I think that maybe the film would be. Kind of gauged what their red flags would be. There wasn't any. She didn't really care, to be perfectly honest. She's quite open, willing to speak about almost anything. At that point, the agent wanted to get a bit more of the sort of business side of things, potentially, like, what money she could make from that, essentially. So, like, that was a wee bit of the distribution side, and that's the point where I thought, right, okay, I need to get a production company, like, involved with this. So I'd spoke to, like, a few different ones previously. I think it was at the Edinburgh TV Festival of the year, and, like, I got in touch with a couple, and basically 2 of them did get back to me. 2 of them did, and I had a conversation with both of them and then decided to go with one. But, like, at that point, like, I'd already sent a deck over to the agent and, like, to Ailish herself, and, like, a wee bit of a pitch video that essentially what I'd done, I ripped stuff from YouTube, put it together and said, look, this is what it could potentially look like. So yeah.
And you've done this a number of times.
Yeah, I think, like, this one was slightly different, though, in terms of, because obviously she was famous, that I didn't actually need to go out and shoot anything for the pitch video. So actually it was the easiest commission that I'd ever had. We literally came up with the idea, and then it was commissioned 2 months later. I was always convinced, just because who she was, we're going to obviously include her mum's story in it as well, that it was, like, in my mind, it was a guaranteed commission. And that's the way that I always seen it. And the production company were like, oh, well, manage expectations. I was like, well, my view was that if this doesn't get commissioned, I don't know what would, essentially. But the 2 other ones before that, like, my first one for the BBC, it was about a female motorcyclist. And basically, it was working class family, like, it was, I guess, like, underdog story, that type of thing. And essentially that was a Bridging the Gap short film, pitched to the BBC, and then it got made into a half an hour. The other one that I made on that was called The Boxer. It was about a female boxer who was trying to be a world champion. He was Commonwealth champion. She was married to a woman, and they were expecting a baby. So that was kind of like the story of that. And essentially with that, while I was in post-production on The Racer, I was actually filming The Boxer, and, like, I was working with a production company, so I kept on saying to them, like, I'm filming this other documentary, and the BBC already knows about it, and they're quite keen on it. And I was like, should we, like, send stuff into them? I was like, I've got all this footage. And they didn't seem that interested. Like, they were doing all these other things, and to be honest, they were doing like high level, like £1 million like type stuff. And I'm like, well, they're not interested in what I'm doing. There's not a lot of money involved with it. And because I was that green, I didn't really realise like me constantly talking about this documentary, like they've got bigger fish to fry. So I remember like I said to them like on the Friday, and they kind of just like, I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I was like, right, that's it, I've had enough. So I got all the footage and I cut it together. Made like a bit of a pitch video, and then like when I went into their office, I was like, did you see that email I sent? And they watched it, and then they were like, oh my God, we should pitch this to somewhere. So it really made me realise that it's like, when you talk to people, it's like you've got to make them believe. So like, obviously the materials in terms of what you've shot is just like so important. That in the deck as well, obviously just explaining the story where at times it could be just a simple synopsis. Because I think like when you pitch to someone, I was doing it like at Sheffield last week, you tell people the story and they're like, oh, that's interesting. But sometimes when you actually see the stuff, that's when like that turns a bit more into a firmer interest, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, so you give them something that they can actually see and get a proper sense
I mean,
of.
telling people the story, sometimes it's just like, oh, who cares? But then when they actually hear someone speaking, they see the environment, they see the story, and like boxing's quite visual as well, so.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, we're going to take a look at a clip from Black Camel Pictures. I believe it is your showreel.
Call me Annika. It's quite long.
Well, which leads perfectly into what I was going to say, in that you have brought many ideas to the screen, and you're essentially at the other end of the table to Alex as well, and that people are also coming to you with ideas. So what is that process like within an indie, and how does that work for you?
Every project is different, and it can be an individual who brings an idea, and it can be something that I might find, it can be something the development team might find. And you know, I think we've been around a long time as a company, so we're very empathetic to how ideas come about. And, you know, some of our shows have come, and films and projects have come from IP. You know, you can see Sunshine on Leith. That was obviously, that was a brilliant play. And I remember going to see that play, that musical, and looking around and just thinking, God, this audience are having a really, really good time. And I went back, and I had a couple of people working for me at the time, not as many as there are now, but I said, look, can you all come and see this play? And we went off to see it again. And I then looked at them, and they were all having a good time. And I looked, you know, and I thought, right, okay, that is something that we should definitely try and compete for. So, you know, that one came around that way. Tom Gates, I was on a school trip with my kids, who were much, much younger than they are now. And I went to, I just saw this woman speaking, and she held, honestly, 500 kids in the palm of her, she had them in the palm of her hand, and they were drawing and they were laughing, and there wasn't a phone in sight. And I thought, this is amazing. This woman is amazing, and what she's making is amazing for these kids. And I went up to her afterwards and I said, have you done anything with your books? And she said, oh, look, you know, I'm really sorry that, you know, we're about to do a deal. And I was like, can I put my hat in the ring? You know, and competed with much bigger companies, and that's always interesting, never feel that you shouldn't go for something, because sometimes creators, I can go off on lots of different tangents, but, sometimes creators want to stay close to the creation project. They don't necessarily want to sell out for loads of money. So don't believe that you haven't necessarily got a chance, on some shows, on some projects. We've made obviously quite a lot of original work from all our horror films. We made I like to say, it sounds very grand, we made a franchise, but we made a trilogy of action horror films. And, just seeing what you've been doing, just going back to kind of having an idea and hustling it and trying to work out how you're going to get stuff made. To be honest, the drive and the energy and the passion to make things is exactly the same as it was when we were doing our first show, and the team who work in our office, they do look at me pulling my hair out going, oh my God, I'm dealing with the commissioners, or I'm dealing with, Screen Scotland, or whatever it is, it's, you're still having, a different type of stress because maybe we're dealing with bigger budgets than we were when we first started. But, you've got to really believe in your ideas, haven't you? Fundamentally, that's what all three of us sitting here have, is the tenacity and the determination and the drive to find an idea and then turn it into something. And I have been a magpie, I think, over the years. I haven't, I don't go. I think now I'm probably really a bit more hardened and commercial because I've got a lot of mouths to pay at the end of every month, and that is a reality check, let me tell you. But when we didn't have that, I would definitely kind of go, oh, that's really nice. Let's go and try and develop this. Whereas now I'm like, is it going to make money? Can I pay my wages? Right. Can I get a crew? Can I actually get it converted? So there is a difference when you're carrying a company than there is when it was me and Ciaran for 15 years around the kitchen table. That's a very different skill set. But it was the same amount of hustle and the same drive. It's just slightly needs more zeros now.
Yes. And so as you were saying, you've got a lot of people to pay, and it takes a lot of time and effort and resources to develop ideas. And we all know it's getting harder and harder to get commissions just now. So how do you decide, or what makes you go, this idea, this is worth investing in, I'm going to put the resources into developing this?
I think interestingly, coming from feature filmmaking, with feature films, often you put your finance together with lots of different bits of money. And I think that has been a really good skill set in the current market. Because when we only moved into TV in 2016, probably development, 2018, a bit more, when we actually got our first kind of proper commissions, or managed to kind of pull a finance plan together. But the ethos of all of the feature film independent producing is what has, I think, enabled us to stay the course, and why we're still here is, I can go out, like with Gifted, for example, the BBC only gave us, maybe a third of the budget. I then went to France, I then went to Germany, I then got the tax credit. And, you're putting these bits of money together to drive your finance plan into something that you can then close, and you can then convert, and you can then obviously hire your crew with. But I think if I have a skill set ahead of some of the other producers who've maybe been around, maybe a longer time in editorial, who are brilliant editorial producers, I think, managing to put finance plans together is what has helped us stay the course, I think, with multiple financiers. Yeah.
Ciaran, you didn't go for the traditional funding route for the feature, and you have kind of touched on that, but it would be good to know, was there one thing that kind of led to that decision of, I'm just going to make this and I've got X amount put away for the budget?
I think if you're a writer-director, you're in a very particular position in terms of your role within a project that's going to get made, and if people are trying to put together financing for it. Because if you're trying to put together financing for a project that needs to have zeros on the end and make money, there is a motivation to have someone who's proven themselves, and it's a difficult thing to do as a writer-director to get to that point. And I don't think there's really any easy way to do it. So, we're kind of fortunate over here that you do have like screen funding, like government funding. They don't have that in America. But I think what can happen sometimes is we get it in our head that that's the way, you know, and that's the path that people expect. Their first feature film, it has to happen that way. And I've seen people kind of wait around for a long, long time. You know, like you can just get told no for decades, basically, and you've only got so much time to actually get moving. And I was kind of weirdly fortunate. It didn't feel fortunate at the time, but like one of the main decision makers at the kind of talent development Screen Scotland thing kind of indiscreetly told me that they would never fund me as a writer-director. And that was actually kind of useful because it meant that was clearly closed as an option. Like there's always turnover of staff, so it's not the same now, but it was kind of useful to know that, because otherwise I might have just thought like, oh, maybe next year, because I kind of did have enough experience to essentially have qualified and thought that I was in the running for it. But it was quite good to know that's just not there. So I kind of had to just figure out a different way of doing it. So yeah, that was actually kind of like a key factor, probably, like knowing.
Because you've done it.
Yes, well you can, and this is an interesting thing. Is like, yeah. So when you're at this point, like people will answer emails, and they will look at projects that it's the same project if I'd sent them 3 years ago, and you just kind of have to understand that. Like people are getting a lot of emails. And there's a lot of people out there who want to do it. And if you've got a say like you made a BAFTA nominated feature, you're just that bit more likely to get someone to respond to your email. Not every time though. Like you still can't expect that everyone's going to make the time for that. But you just have to gradually improve your credibility, and there's not really any easy way to do that. You know, so you can wait around for the dream ticket, which is a 3 million like BFI funded film, but you could wait your whole life. You know, so that was kind of my thinking.
Alex, I saw you laughing there. Is this relatable?
Yeah, I was just trying to sending emails to people, and you somehow think that like you've maybe made it to this. Like I guess after my first one, I was like, oh yeah, like this is pretty cool. Like, being a film for the BBC now, like I've made it, so to speak. And then you make a second one, and then you start getting nominations, and then like I guess when I got nominated for a BAFTA, I was like surely this is going to make a difference. And like you'll still send out emails, and people wouldn't get back to you. So yeah, like I think like, but you don't know what people are getting bombarded with, and who's getting in touch with them about what projects and stuff like that. So like yeah, there's a sort of sense like when I speak to people, there's like nobody's getting back to me, nothing's happening. I was like, well, I'm also in the same boat as well. So like it happens quite a lot. And I think as well with the way that commissioning is, obviously it's lessening. There's like less slots, which means there's less money, which means there's less opportunities. So that when all these like different documentaries, from my point of view, in a factual sort of sense, is that they're only picking like X amount. It was like when the BBC Scotland channel started, it was supposed to be that there was going to be 6 slots for 1 hour. I think that's shrunk to like 3 now. So could you imagine the amount of ideas that people have like for a 1 hour, and there's only 3 slots? I mean, what's the point in that channel? It's not going to tell stories about like things from Scotland, eh? So yeah.
How do you balance developing your own ideas with sort of staying afloat as well? Because obviously development does take a lot of time.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the moment I'm working with this company that do content creation, and that pays the bills essentially, because like I feel like that unless your pitch materials are really quite solid and they're really quite slick, that nobody's even going to take a second thought on it. Because I think the way the commissioning, like certainly the way that I feel that it's changed quite significantly. So I kind of benefited it from the Eilish McColgan one, because the way that the BBC seen it was that younger people knew who Eilish was, older people knew who Liz was. So they had an inbuilt audience that the BBC didn't need to find. And I think part of the problem now is that whether it's the BBC or anybody else, that they want that inbuilt audience, so they don't need to find it. And if you don't have that, it's harder to get that commission then. So I feel like my first 2 films would not be commissioned in the current climate the way that is, because they weren't famous. It was just a really interesting story. They didn't have inbuilt audiences, and like, in my opinion, they wouldn't have been commissioned. So part of the problem is that you've got to make sure that all those things are pretty solid, and then you go and pitch it, and then of course it could be just, you could be knocked back in any ways. Like I just pitched a couple of ones last year, and it came back, it was like, oh, this is not right for us. And the other one is like, we've got too much sport already. But obviously I don't know that. So I've took time and effort and money, like obviously like development and something that was only specifically good to be pitched to BBC Scotland. So I've wasted time, effort and money. So, but you don't know what you don't know, essentially. So that's why I feel like going to Sheffield Doc Fest, a lot of things, and having informal talks for people. What are they looking for? What's already been commissioned? Because you could be working on an idea that someone is doing very similar in a similar space that's already knocked you out the game before you're even aware that that's happened.
Yeah. Arabella, I mean, running a company comes with a different set of pressures. What are some of the challenges that maybe people don't see?
I mean, even this morning, this is what happens on Father's Day in our house. We're like, how are we going to get the cash flow together for the next project? Right, we're not going to be closed we don't think we're going to be closed for 4 or 5 months. We probably need £500,000 ahead of that. How are we going to be able to get the £500,000? Are we going to get the funding circle loan, at that, 7%? This is breakfast in our house. This is how it goes. It's like you are always worrying about cash flow and how you're going to get the next show up and how we're going to, are the scripts going to be ready? And that project, fingers crossed we do get the green light on the one that we've got coming down the tracks. But, that is, if we can get the next show made, it's much bigger than the show that we've just made, the Island and Chelan. So it means that can give the company some stability for 2 years. And I think, for us, we are now about how do we maintain the jobs of our team? How do we, and also frankly, look after everybody's mental health, because I think that is the other thing is I don't want to put a huge burden on my team who are working really hard, and I don't want them all to have a breakdown in the process of us trying to stay afloat. So if we can get something with a slightly bigger budget, it means that I can look at everybody and go, all right, you've got 2 years' work. That's a huge difference in the ecology that we're talking about, which is, how vulnerable freelancers are. If I, as a boss, can say, look, guys, I'm going to put your stability, your security, is absolutely paramount to me, because if I've got my team, I can have my own mental health, and I can really kind of feel more relaxed and kind of think, okay, this is good. We can land the ship for the next couple of years. Whereas, when you do like Gifted and when we were doing The Island, is that we can't get really ahead as a company. So I think for me, when you scale, I guess people would say we've scaled a bit. You are just needing more money in it, to be able to pay wages. That said, I think what changes is that you become less close to the material, because you are often on that sort of strategic, where are we going, how are we going to get that show there, rather than, like you were saying, you were kind of like high on making your show, that like wild euphoria. When I was directing Float, that was my euphoric moment as well. It's like you're right back, you're in the director's chair, you're in the decision making, you're working with your actors. That made me the happiest I think probably I have been as well. So, happiness is stability, but also I completely feel you in terms of like being that director, seeing your work get made, and we won the BAFTA actually for Float as well. And for me, that was a real high actually, beating Shetland, beating Dinosaur for a short form show that I directed. I was like, fine, that was brilliant. So that was a real high, and I think I think I would say a bit more money in the banks allows us to take more risk. Our mantra is always be producing, always be producing, always be producing, and I think that's what I would say to everybody. Like you're talking about making your teasers, make it you've got if you want to be a producer, you have to work out how to get it made. You can't sit there for ages. I think what you've done is brilliant, but you do have to work out how you're going to make something, because then you will get noticed by the industry and you will be able to cut through those layers. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I think that, you know, I think that's what I would say. And I think if we're taking on an assistant now, you know, I want to see that that person is out there making stuff. I want to see the content they're creating, because there's no excuse not to be making. You know, if you walk in and go, well, I really want to be an assistant to producer, show me that you're interested. Show me that you care about our industry and that you are learning the skills to do it.
Yes.
I've got miles.
Excellent. I've got one last question, but if you've got questions, make sure you've fired them into the QR code and we'll get to questions. Arabella, you're right, it is about risk taking, and clearly there have been some big rewards in taking those risks. If there's one thing that you want to impart with everyone here is what comes from taking those risks for you all personally.
Well, what do you mean, like, we take risks and then what's the consequences of taking risks?
Well, the benefits.
Well, right, yeah. So it's this thing of like, it has very much changed, like how I'm perceived as a filmmaker, and also like it's totally changed where I am at, and you know, career-wise, and you know, like I'm currently like a co-writer on like an international co-production with, you know, like a really experienced team, and like Tummy Monster was key in getting that job. I'd never been asked to be like a professional writer on a project before. I just finished on Friday, again paid to write the script for a film that should be shooting early next year. And again, it's like got very credible producers and production companies standing behind that. And it's a kind of interesting thing, because I think when you're plugging away trying to improve your standing as a filmmaker or whatever way you are, I think your successes always feel a lot smaller than you think they're going to feel. Like, I kind of thought Tummy Monster was going to be more successful than it was, and you know, like I felt like I made mistakes in the festival strategy. I signed up with a bad sales agent, and I actually ended up having to pay money to get out of that contract, because they were actually just going to bury the film. And then even the Scottish BAFTA nomination thing, I kind of thought it was going to be more of an immediate shift. But then, you know, gradually you just realize, no, this has just become your norm, because this is it's still really hard, but it's a lot better than it was like 5 years ago. And actually, it is very fortunate that I'm now at the point where, you know, I'm essentially making a living writing and developing, you know, my next projects and working on a slate of projects. So it has paid off, but it's just the way that it kind of transitions into paying off it's almost imperceptible as it's happening, you know.
I guess to a certain extent, getting paid. Let's be honest, getting paid for something that you love doing is like a massive, big thing, because we've all been there just like filming, like for the love of the game, essentially. But I think like because like I make ob docs, it's like being there in the moment. On the Boxer, basically, like I remember I was filming and I was thinking to myself, am I wasting my time on this? This is a lot of time and money. Will the BBC like actually take it? And I'd been filming for 3 months and I was starting to get a bit worried, basically, and funds were getting low. So I remember like in the morning that was on like fight night, essentially fight day, and like Kirsten said that like her wife was expecting a baby, and I was like, oh my God. I was like, this is a perfect story point. Like, surely this is going to make a difference. And that night that she was fighting for the Commonwealth title, and just from when she went into the venue and the stuff that happened between her and her wife and like our trainer, it was all those like stereotypical moments, but done in a like in-your-face way. And then I went to the fight, she flattened this woman, won the title, and then basically she announced to the whole sort of arena that like her wife was expecting her first baby, and like I had tears in my eyes, because it was just like, it was such a beautiful moment. And I thought to myself, how lucky me to actually be here doing this. And then we literally pitched 2 weeks later and I got commissioned, and I was like, thank God, because I literally have no money in my bank account. So like, yeah, I'm always quite like, on the Elish McColgan thing, the production company said, well, what do you want to do with this film? And I said, I want to make money. And they were like, is that your #1 priority? I was like, yeah, I'm a professional filmmaker. I want to make money. I was like, second, I want to make the best film I could possibly make. And thirdly, I wanted to like enhance my career. So like, yeah, I think like, I'm quite like a stickler for that. There's like, once you pass that sort of Rubicon, like, yeah, you need to be paid, essentially. So yeah.
Yes. Arabella, I think
What was the actual question?
I think, well, you actually led the beautiful segue into it because you were talking about directing floating things, you know, taking risks and the benefits that come from taking risks.
I mean, I think, you know, when you're taking risks, I mean, I think it's, you know, it's probably, you probably sit there and go, oh, it's all right for her talking about taking risks, you know, now that we're, you know, doing bigger projects and everything. But, you know, I do remember when, you know, we were starting off and, you know, for a lot of years we were taking risks. And, you know, and I still say to Ciaran now, I said, look, you know, I said I was really lucky because you could go out and earn us a living, because he was employed as a line producer. And when we weren't making stuff, he was bringing us in a wage. So, I mean, there's risk and then there's not putting yourself at breaking point. And I think, you know, so I think, you know, you have to have a sensible approach about your attitude to risk and go, well, am I prepared to risk to do this creative endeavour? I think, don't you think? You know, just like how are we navigating it? You know, let's not say, look, everybody go off and, you know, like risk everything you've got and put it on black. I think you need to, you know, I mean, maybe that's just, you know, in terms of where you are.
There was like a kind of strange thing after this, because like I did a lot of interviews about, you know, the way I made this film, and I did get quite a lot of people emailing me almost like looking for encouragement to just spend all their savings and make a feature film. And I'm like, I'm not going to encourage you to do that, like, because I honestly don't know how it's going to turn out, and I don't know I don't know who you are and whether you can weather that, because it was, you know, it is stressful. So
this is a very violent timer.
Yeah.
But also, just by way of a show of hands, who sent in questions?
Calculated.
Yeah, calculated risk, I think. Yeah, but also I think, you know, I was just going to say, you know, it's interesting, isn't it, when you were saying you didn't get the film into the market enough, you know, and I think that is, you know, that's pretty tough, isn't it, when you think you've curated this and made this beautiful thing, you know, made this fantastic project, and then you haven't sold it as successfully as you know, in spite of your BAFTA nom, you think, oh, hang on, that should have travelled more widely, and I think. Yeah. I mean, my philosophy of always be producing is, you know, you learn so much on every project. You know, I never fail to be astounded by how much I learn on every production we make, you know, and that doesn't change.
Yeah, that distribution side of things was unavoidably something I didn't know about, because I hadn't gone on that journey with a feature film before, so I couldn't have known. And like now I do know stuff I didn't know. So yeah, it feels a little bit painful because I would love to have known it and just been a little bit more forearmed. But there are some people who are doing a similar journey who are talking to me about it, and I do give them advice, and they won't be making the same mistakes I did. So, yeah.
Well, on that, let's see if anyone has any relevant questions.
So we've got a couple of sort of closing charities. Somebody has been part of it and would like to know how do I get back for people who might be interested in it. And then there's another question, sort of similar. What's the best way for a screenwriter to approach collaborators?
Shall I go screenwriter, because I don't know what the pilot is? I think if you're a screenwriter, you have to write a script and you have to make your script brilliant. And I would say that when we were making Outpost, our first horror film, you know, we ended up working with a 23-year-old writer, and his spec script came into us, and we were like in our early 30s, but you know, his spec script was brilliant, and that has been the beginning of an incredibly long relationship with that writer. You know, he is now, you know, I don't know, in his 40s, but he's just been writing on Gifted for us. You know, he's done, you know, he's got a really good agent in London. You know, he gets lots of episodes, and you know, so I mean, but that started with a brilliant spec. So I don't know if I've answered the question, but I'm saying, you know, a really good spec. And then, look, get talking to people like Ellie and Katie in our office. Those, you need to nurture the gateway relationships. You know, that's a real focus. Who are the PAs, the development people, because they will lobby your work to us as the decision makers. You know, the amount of times I've got them going, this is a really good, this is a really good script writer, this is really good, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. And they're like, no, Bella, look at this, look at this, look at this. So that's kind of, I think those gateway people are really helpful in terms of, you know, getting your work into, you know, in front of people who can move things forward, I think.
Yeah, I feel there's the same principle seems to apply in a lot of areas of the film industry where, you know, whether you're approaching a sales agent or you're a screenwriter who's trying to get a producer to read your script, the less cold you can make your cold approach, essentially, is the better. And you have to be quite creative and resourceful in how you do that. And that doesn't mean like being rude and stalking somebody. But, you know, like in my case, the cold approach is less cold because, you know, you made a feature film, but it can also be if you have developed relationships with a director as a screenwriter, and then as a consequence you have you've worked together on something that they directed and you wrote, then you have something that because I think it's probably quite hard to get your first script made as a screenwriter, and like relationships are really they're really important, you know, and they can come in all shapes and sizes, basically.
Wise words. Thank you very much. I think we will wrap up there. I know you're all bursting to go for drinks. If you do have any questions that you've not asked, maybe you will be able to ask some people at the networking. Thank you very much to our panellists. Thank you again to Claire and TV Mindset and Action for Freelancers for helping us get this day together. Thank you.
Thank you.